So what I was going to do tonight was, my first thought was, what would you want to hear? Because I'm up against the most inspirational speakers. I mean, Mark and Brezzy and Marco and Jamie. And I'm like, what could I do that would just engage you guys to think in the way? And I thought, a big wad of dosh. How would you sell your big startup? And you know what I thought? The second thought was, I am bored shitless talking about this. So what I'd like to do is actually talk to you about what my real passion is. So for me personally, there's something happening right now in our world today, and it's the reason I am where I am today, not because of going out for shed loads of money, which, by the way, is a great fringe benefit. But I've been a storyteller myself since I was 19 years old. I remember my first letter to the Irish Times. My religion teacher once wrote a report saying that I was prematurely cynical, which was a great preparation for the job I eventually did. But something happened over the past 8 years that I have to say to you is on par with Gutenberg inventing the printing press, and Marconi inventing the radio, and Logie Baird inventing the television. And what's happened for me is that it's been a complete revolution in the way that we all tell stories to each other. And we will grow up, you're already very young obviously, but we will grow up and tell our kids about this time when the revolution happened. And we will look back and go, wow, we lived through that time. And it's a time, and I think of revolution when I think of this picture. This is Ed Murrow. So everybody out there probably in their own fields of business has their own heroes. Well, this guy was my hero. He stood for everything that was ethical and valuable about journalism and broadcasting from the war in London during the 40s. And when I look at him, I kind of get a bit sad, because if you think about what it used to be like when I was a journalist, when I started out, you guys were the passive audience, right? We all sat at an appointed time and we listened to the voice of God telling us what was news in the world. And just think about what's happened in the past 8 years. You are all storytellers. You just have to have a camera phone and a connection to a social network. You don't need people like me, journalists, to tell your stories. You can tell them directly to people just like you. You can reach anybody in the world. If your story is compelling enough, you can find an audience without going through the media. And for me, that was a revolutionary moment. I realized that if you think about the age of the eyewitness, as I would call it, we have a situation now where there's 100 hours of video uploaded on YouTube every single minute. Just think about that idea. So we're all telling stories. We can all put that video up on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And part of the problem is, and I call this the furry cat problem, because 99%, actually 99.9999999% of the content that we do create is of no use to anybody in terms of its universal value. We're putting things up that, what we have for lunch, talking about our pets and our kids. And for the media, it's a real problem, because when you think about the way the stories are covered, this is an actual screen grab from CNN during the coverage of the Boston bombing, right? Now look at that, just imagine, right? For the 0.0001% of things that are loaded up by ordinary people like yourself, the media have to delve into all of that overabundance of information to find things that make sense to them. And generally, they don't. Generally, they're completely confused by what you guys, the former audience, are actually doing. And it gets to this kind of bizarre, absurd situation. And this was my inspiration for Storyful. So I was a TV journalist. This is me in Isfahan in Iran. And Iran was one of those big stories that foreign correspondents will tell you get under your skin. Like it could be the Middle East. For me, I just went back twice, 3 times a year to Iran because it just so fascinated me. And if you see here, I had to have a camera crew, a satellite dish, to get my stories home. Most of my job is about logistics. It wasn't about journalism. And about 2009, there was an election that was, if you might remember, protested by all the young people who went out in the streets and said, we haven't got our vote. And that story wasn't covered by people like me. We were locked away in hotel rooms, repeating third-hand the rumors that we were hearing. In fact, it was 17, 18-year-old men and women who were doing the first-hand reporting, and that was my light bulb moment. I said to myself, wow, there's been a revolution here. It used to be I had to have a printing press or a satellite dish to tell people the news. Now we as journalists, we're the managers of this overabundance of information, and that's where my company came from. I imagined what would it be like if I started a news agency from scratch, forgot about all the issues of employing thousands of people, and what happened was Storyful. Our motto is, when everybody is sharing content, how do you find the stories that are worth telling? And I'm not going to bore you with the detail, but Storyful now works with basically every single news publisher in the world. We work with everybody from Facebook and YouTube, all the way to the Ellen DeGeneres Show, Queen Latifah. I spent 20 years in college, by the way, to work for Queen Latifah, which amuses my kids no end. They think I'm a hero now. But we work with this entire range of publishers and TV shows and social networks and advertisers and brands. And what we do as well is we put out videos that we manage. So if you've probably seen any viral video of funny cats and kids, we manage them. We get about 100 million views a month on YouTube alone, about 150 million across all kinds of platforms like Yahoo and AOL. And that's the story of our success. But in all of this, I'm just going to give you a quick, brief example because I don't have very long to talk about it. But what I want to persuade you tonight, that I don't know what businesses you're in. You could be in advertising or marketing. You could be singers, songwriters, journalists, just people who love a good story. There's never been a better time to be a storyteller. We have never had the chance to describe the world we live in more authentic and real and raw detail. I'll give you an example in Syria, where we've had this terrible civil war. The Arab Spring has been going on for 5 years, and our company has been finding new ways to tell a story that is so dramatic, sometimes so horrible. So this is an example of something. Have you ever GoPro cameras? GoPro camera on top of a tank. When you see this video playing, this is a screen grab. It's like something out of Call of Duty or one of those video games that you see, where the GoPro camera's on top of a Syrian tank. It captures the moment when the lead tank in the convoy is blown up by a rebel missile. So we get this video, and in itself it's just remarkable. I've never seen anything so raw and authentic as a war correspondent myself. But moments later, we also see the attack from the rebels' point of view. They had a camera, and they filmed the same attack. I had never seen, in real time, in a war, two sides of the same conflict. And this is just one example of the stories that we're telling, thanks to social media, thanks to this golden age. We, for example, are able, in the case of a Syrian chemical weapons attack last year, to map within hours all of the content and detail about this terrible event. And we were able to contradict the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, who said there's no way that attack happened because all the videos predate the attack. We could turn around with the help of a wisdom in the crowd and say, no, it's Pacific Standard Time in the videos. We were able to go out there and contradict the propaganda of one of the biggest regimes in the world. And every week, our storytellers in Storyful, this is last weekend, are able, in this case, an Islamic State video, we could verify the location because of all these wonderful tools we have. On the hour, every hour, Sky News, you can see the top right-hand corner, is broadcasting the context that our people here in Dublin, about 5 minutes walk away, are putting on these incredible stories. Just so you don't think that we're totally obsessed with Syria, you might remember this last year. I think it was Jimmy Kimmel. Do you remember this? Viral video went out of a woman twerking upside down. She falls, she sets herself on fire. We called bullshit on this, right? The point I'm trying to make here is a serious point. For the first time in history, journalists are motivated to stop stories, not start stories. We're there to verify, to help you sort through all the news from the noise. And that's the wonderful part of what we're going through today, a whole new way of telling stories, whether it's some woman acting the arse or it's something so important as Syria. And I just want to draw to a close by just saying some warnings I would have. Like, this is the first radio tape recorder I ever used as a journalist. It's called a Ewer. It's a beautiful piece of machinery. But we all think, because we're used to this kind of thing, that what we're living through is a technological revolution. You know, we're not. Despite the fact that we have these wonderful tools, it's not. It's a cultural revolution. It's a change in the way that human beings talk to each other. And I just leave it at this and say to you that there are 4 or 5 things that I would say the new principles of this golden age of storytelling. First of all, you and us together as a community are no longer passive. We don't sit there waiting for some voice of God, big fat arsehole of a journalist to tell us what's going on. We are active in the process of gathering news. We don't care about searching anymore. We don't go into Google and tap in something. We go onto Facebook and YouTube and let someone come to us with something wonderful we never expected. We're in the age of discovery. We're also not worried anymore about who has a title, right? I don't care who the mayor of the town is or the politician. I just want someone like me and you to be on the scene to tell me what's happening. And that's a liberation in itself. Finally, clocks, not clicks. And I robbed this shamelessly from somebody I respect, where we're not looking anymore about millions of views and we're spending 10 seconds on a furry cat video. We're all worried about how much time and engagement we can have with stories, how much time we can spend sharing and actively curating. And I would argue that Samuel Beckett is probably the best guide in this whole regard, where We're all trying to change things and do something different in a time when nobody has the answers. Beckett has a great quote: ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And in everything we're doing as storytellers, journalists are not good at failure. We have to try something new. We have to take risks. That's what's going to get us as storytellers to the next generation. Okay, so I've got a cute cat, and I'm going to have a cute baby to finish off. If you think about this, it's only 8 years since the camera phone. It's only 7 years since most of the social networks are born. Think of where your infant kid's going to be, if you have kids like me, in 10 years' time. The answer is we don't know. Anybody that tells you they know what's going on is telling you a big fat lie. But what I can tell you is this: newspapers, TV, radio, people keep saying to me, do we have a future? I don't give a shit. Because what's more important is the stories that are told. If you're mobile, if you're social, and if you essentially talk about video, you're going to survive this era. If you give people value, and what they crave most of all in an age when there's so much content is trust and authenticity. That's what's going to get us into the next generation. That's what should guide storytellers as we try to work out what that kid's going to be doing in 10 years' time. My 9-year-old treats her iPad like a limb, like a hand, right? I have a friend who says his 18-month-old kid walks up to the TV and goes, broken. So we don't know where it's going, but I just want to say to you that the value in this age is those of us who can sort the news from the noise. Those of us who can find the stories that are worth telling when we're all telling stories. And ladies and gentlemen, that's where the big wad of cash is. When you find that value and you can make something out of it, that's when you get the wads of cash. But more importantly, that's when all of us, whether we're advertisers, marketers, storytellers, songwriters, journalists, we've got to understand we're living in a golden age, and it's up to us to get the value. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, Jenny, how's it going? How are you?
Good to see you. Congratulations on the sale of Storyful. I have to say that first and foremost. And because we are celebrating Dublin tonight, I have to ask you now, with the sale, is HQ staying firmly in Dublin, and what's going to change?
So nothing. I mean, we got a great opportunity where we went with this big corporation, News Corp, and they said to us, we want to stay in Dublin. I'm not breaking a secret here, but tonight we're going to announce that we're having a big R&D partnership here. We're bringing a lot of News Corp's people, R&D, to Dublin. It's going to be announced at 6 in the morning. Don't tell anyone, by the way. That's
brilliant.
But just an example. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So it's funny, right now there's some News Corp executives waiting for me at dinner, and the key thing for those guys is that this town has shown something they never expected. 5 years ago, I would never have said Dublin could be a center of something really global and big, and now I'm convinced our time has come. And I think when I go to people in the States and try to persuade them this is where they should be, this is where Storyful or I should be, they don't bat an eyelid. They walk down here, they walk out the door of this building, they see Facebook and they see Google, but they walk 5 minutes away, and there's so many great startups. So again, partly, like I say, about the golden age of storytelling, there's a golden age for Dublin. And it's just beginning.
So exciting to hear, because I just assumed that the big guys coming in would go, you have to come to London, you have to move to New York. So there won't suddenly be multiple HQs all over the place.
No, I mean, we do have multiple HQs in the sense we have Hong Kong, London, New York, Germany. So we have people all over the world. But it all comes back to something that is so powerful here, and that's the culture of storytelling. That's why I'm obsessed with this notion. So when you're an Irish person, you go abroad and you're trying to pitch to a big international investment company, it's not that hard. You know, you're brought up to tell a story and persuade people to give you money you shouldn't have, right? That's the first thing. But once they do actually settle down and realize there's something of value, it is not a hard sell anymore. I mean, 4 years ago when everything was going to the toilet, it was really hard. But now, you know, literally, there's an infectious energy that actually, only because I travel away to Silicon Valley and Berlin and Stockholm, these other startup capitals, we have something very important here. Solidarity. People have your back, right? They don't want to knock you down. And creativity, which is very different to Silicon Valley, which is quite dead and one-dimensional. So it's only because I can travel away that I can come back and tell you, hand on heart, there's something special here, something special happening now.
It's so fantastic to hear that. And do you feel like our infrastructure is getting there fast enough to sort of keep up with visionaries like yourself? You know, the actual...
No. And we're going to have to fight the system in some ways, you know? I mean, how many kids in our schools are being taught how to code? How many kids in our schools are being taught about the emotional mental resilience. I know Bresley's going to talk about this, that, you know, make you be able to take a crazy batshit idea and go and take it full term. So no. So we are going to do what we've always done, that's fight against official lethargy to try and get our ideas out there. But I think we're better able because we're such a global nation at this stage.
Well, I think you're an absolute inspiration.
Oh, Jenny, thank
Mark
you.
Little, thank you so much. Such a pleasure to have you here. It really is. Thank you. Thank you. Seriously.